Once upon a time in the village of there lived a compassionate nurse named Amaka. Amaka was well loved by the villagers of Umun. She was the eldest daughter of her elderly, impoverished parents, and she had 6 siblings. Life was incredibly difficult for them, so much so that they often struggled to find enough food to eat. Although they were poor farmers, they had big dreams for Amaka. They worked tirelessly, saving every penny they could to send her to school, with the hope that she would one day lift them out of poverty and care for her siblings. After graduating from nursing school, Nurse Amaka struggled to find a job in the city and was under immense pressure to provide for her family. With no other options, she returned home and accepted a position at the village community hospital. Her salary was so small that it barely covered the family's basic needs, but she worked tirelessly to support her loved ones. One fateful day, a wealthy woman named Mrs. Okuna drove all the way from the city Nkati to the village of She had a problem and went straight to the village hospital. Upon meeting Nurse Amaka, she immediately felt that Amaka was the right person to confide in. Mrs. Okuna was a young, wealthy woman who had everything money could buy, but she longed for a son to fulfill her husband's wishes. Desperate to keep her husband happy, she confided in Nurse Amaka about her secret. Mrs. Okuna explained that she had already given her husband 4 daughters, but he continued to pressure her for a son. When she was pregnant with her last daughter, she had complications, and the doctor told her she wouldn't be able to get pregnant again. Her husband, however, was still desperate for a son. In her desperation, Mrs. Okuna made a shocking request. She asked Nurse Amaka to find a pregnant woman carrying a son and arranged to sell the baby to her. In return, she promised Amaka a large sum of money. Nurse Amaka refused, saying that such an act was against her beliefs and that she could never participate in something so unethical. The next day, Mrs. Okuna returned to the hospital. This time, Mrs. Okuna tripled the amount of money she had offered Nurse Amaka the previous day. She insisted that this money would change Amaka's life and that of her family forever. Mrs. Okuna had already done some research and learned about Amaka's impoverished background, so she increased the offer to make it even more tempting. Tempted by the promise of financial security for her family, Nurse Amaka began to consider the offer. She couldn't help but fantasize about how much better their lives would be with such a large sum of money. Reluctantly, Amaka agreed to Mrs. Okuna's request. Soon after, Nurse Amaka noticed a pregnant woman who was expecting twin boys. At the village community hospital, Nurse Amaka discovered that the woman was indeed carrying twin boys after she underwent a scan. Seeing an opportunity to fulfill Mrs. Okuna's wishes, Amaka became exceptionally close and kind to the woman. She viewed this woman as her ticket to securing the money Mrs. Okuna had promised. Amaka alerted Mrs. Okuna, who then began faking her own pregnancy to deceive her husband. This way, no one would suspect that she wasn't actually pregnant, nor that the child she was about to present as their son wasn't her own. On the day of the woman's delivery, Nurse Amaka made sure she was in charge of the birth. As soon as the woman gave birth to the twin boys, Amaka took one of the babies and handed him over to Mrs. Okuna, claiming that the other had died. Mrs. Okuna then presented the baby boy to her husband, who was overjoyed. The family celebrated their newfound happiness, completely unaware of the dark secret behind it. Despite her guilt, Nurse Amaka used the money to start living a lavish lifestyle. She provided generously for her family, and everyone was happy with their improved circumstances. However, her parents grew curious about the sudden wealth and asked her how she had come into so much money. Unable to reveal the truth, Amaka lied, telling them that a good Samaritan had come to the hospital and blessed her with the money. She couldn't bring herself to confess the real source of her newfound fortune, so she kept the secret from her parents. Meanwhile, in the Okuna household, the truth about their son's birth remained a closely guarded secret. Mrs. Okuna doted on her adopted son, showering him with love and affection. However, deep down, she couldn't escape the guilt that gnawed at her conscience. As the years passed, the boy grew into a handsome young man, enjoying all the luxuries life had to offer. Mrs. Okuna ensured he had everything he desired, seeing him as the key to maintaining her marriage. Before we continue the story, I'd like to ask my audience to like and subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories. Your support is a lot to me. Meanwhile, the other twin, who remained with his biological parents, also grew into a handsome and gentle young man. Though his family wasn't as wealthy as the Okunas, they did their best to provide him with a good life, filled with love and care. Nurse Amaka, on the other hand, continued to enjoy the wealth she had acquired from selling someone else's baby to Mrs. Okuna. Believing she had arrived with her newfound riches, she quit her job as a nurse, feeling she no longer needed to work for anyone. As time went on, Amaka got married, unaware that her past was about to catch up with her. Years into the marriage, she struggled to get pregnant. She visited numerous hospitals, but nothing seemed to work. Her husband's family began to threaten her, warning that they would force her out of the house if she didn't provide a child. Amaka was baffled, as both she and her husband were medically fit to have children. In her desperation, Amaka confided in her father and confessed how she had sold someone else's child to Mrs. Okuna. Her father advised her to find Mrs. Okuna so they could both confess and reveal the truth, believing that this was the only way to break the curse of her childlessness. However, Mrs. Okuna refused Amaka's request, insisting that she couldn't reveal the truth to her husband. Determined, Amaka and her father decided to search for the young boy. Amaka eventually found the young man whom Mrs. Okuna had adopted. Hesitant but determined, she approached him and revealed the truth about his origins. Shocked and confused, he struggled to come to terms with the revelation that had just turned his world upside down. He then requested to meet his twin brother, and Amaka led him to his biological parents. Meeting his real parents for the first time, he was met with both surprise and joy. They were overjoyed to reunite with their long-lost son. When he met his identical twin brother, he was thrilled to see someone who looked just like him. Heartbroken and feeling betrayed, the twins confronted Mrs. Okuna, demanding answers. Unable to bear the weight of her deception any longer, Mrs. Okuna finally confessed the truth. Mrs. Okuna tearfully confessed the truth about their births, begging everyone for forgiveness, knowing she could never undo the pain she had caused. Despite their anger and hurt, the biological parents of the twin boys chose to forgive both Mrs. Okuna and Amaka. They understood that holding on to anger would only poison their hearts and keep them from moving forward. The twin boys, now aware of their true origins, embarked on a journey of self-discovery, determined to forge their own paths in life. They found comfort in each other's company, drawing strength from the bond that had always united them. As for Amaka, her life took a positive turn. She finally became pregnant and started having children of her own. With her family complete, she found peace of mind and true happiness. Asterisk, asterisk. Moral of the story. True family is built on love, honesty, and acceptance, not on secrets or deception. Forgiveness has the power to heal even the deepest wounds and helps us move forward with grace and compassion. Regardless of gender, all children are equal and should never be subjected to pressure based on their sex. Every child is valuable in the eyes of our Creator. I hope this story teaches you the importance of honesty and doing what is right, no matter the cost. Thank you for watching my videos. Please leave a comment, click the subscribe button. It's totally free. and like and share this video. See you in the next one on Stories and Tales. Bye-bye.